When I bring up romance in tabletop games, most of the reactions fall into one of two categories. People who start gushing to me about their in-game situationship, and people who instantly transform into 10-year-old boys.
Is this a kissing book?
And listen, if you want to keep slaying dungeons and looting dragons without getting entangled in fictional relationships, more power to you. The last thing I want is for people to put stuff into their games that they won't have fun with. But also, this video isn't for you. Might I recommend my video about homebrewing monsters instead? The spiritual opposite of this video in every way. But some people want to incorporate romance into games. They might be inspired by the romances we see in our fantasy media, by relationships in actual play series like Critical Role or Dimension 20, or maybe by the unbelievably horny experience of playing Baldur's Gate 3. I'm not judging, I'm just saying that when Lae'zel started talking about my scent, I suddenly really wished I was wearing headphones. Whatever the reason, romance in tabletop games can be a great addition to the story, but let's be honest, it can also be kinda weird. Not everybody is comfortable casually flirting with their friends, and if you're not all on the same page, a scene can spiral from romantic tension to HR violation before you know it. So today, let's talk about how to bring romance into your games without making things weird. Plus, we'll discuss DMing romantic games, whether or not you should have mechanics for romance, and how to roleplay flirting for awkward people, which could maybe double as real-life advice, although I am not liable for the results. Unless it works great, in which case I take full responsibility and you're welcome. Hey friends, I'm Ginny D, and on my channel I try to help you have more fun with your tabletop games and be more fun to play with. But before we can talk about how to roleplay romance, we have to first establish that the word romance is not nearly specific enough to be useful here. For example, are player characters flirting with each other? With NPCs? Both? Some tables may be cool with one, but not the other. Maybe your game master isn't comfortable role-playing romantic scenes, but doesn't mind if players do. You know, some people just like to watch. Other DMs may not mind players engaging romantically with a few of their many NPCs, as long as they don't have to voice 2/3 of a love triangle. But maybe the players at this table aren't comfortable with the intimacy of a one-on-one player-to-player romance. And of course, this decision doesn't need to be universal. Maybe a few players are interested in romantic plot lines, while others don't want to participate but don't mind it happening around them. All of this is important information to collect before diving headfirst into the kind of tragic, sweeping love story that bards would fist fight over. Not to mention, it's one thing to roleplay handing a rose to a pretty barmaid, and quite another to bring her back to your room and realize that nobody's planning on fading to black. There is a whole spectrum of romantic roleplay that starts with, okay, that NPC is your girlfriend now, and ends with the kind of whispered, candle-lit erotica that most people have to pay for. And before you ask, yes, there are people who want to roleplay that stuff. I did text-based roleplay on Gaia Online as a teenager. I'm not throwing any stones from this glass house. This is why it's so important to be specific about what everyone at the table is okay with. It's not enough to give a blanket yes to romance in your game, because that word could mean very different things to different people. But before we discuss how to talk about and set those boundaries, this video is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Just kidding. You know, people don't believe me when I say I've never even gotten an offer from them. What's wrong, Raid Shadow Legends? What's wrong with me? Am I not good enough for you? Anyway, today's video is brought to you by World Anvil. Welcome to World Anvil After Dark. You're looking for single NPCs in your area, and World Anvil is the world-building toolkit that'll help you find them. Let's meet our lucky bachelorettes. Wisteria the gnome wizard is highly anxious and flunking out of school, but she's also got cute little glasses and her family's rich. World Anvil's wiki-style articles can be indexed and cross-linked, so it's easy to learn about the lucrative family business that could provide you with generational wealth if you play your cards right. Augury's a lawful evil sorcerer, but don't let that scare you off. She's also head of an underground smuggling ring. World Anvil's interactive nestable maps let you see the Thieves Guild Hall hidden beneath her estate, because if you saw it in real life, she'd have to kill you. If Nakrasha doesn't have a crush on you, she'll just crush you. Look for this half-orc bruiser on the field of battle, where dungeon masters can use World Anvil's stat block features to deliver a hell of a first date beatdown. These are just a few of the many features World Anvil offers dungeon masters, writers, and world builders of all kinds, and just a few of the ladies you might encounter there. If you're ready for love, visit worldanvil.com/Ginny and try out the platform for free. And when you're ready for commitment, use the code Ginny to take 51% off any annual membership. Remember, true love may be just a charisma check away. See, Raid Shadow Legends, I'm great at sponsorships. You don't even know what you're missing. So when we talk about setting boundaries, we're basically talking about session zero. This is the commonly used phrase for meeting up with your party before you even start playing, to set expectations and make sure you're all on the same page. Session zero can cover everything from tone and genre, to character concepts, to making sure that you know if someone's personal line in the sand is clowns are fine, necromancers are fine, but under no circumstances should they be combined. Sometimes people kind of scoff at the idea of session Session Zero as a formal thing where people fill out paperwork and follow these rigid structures. I've seen people say stuff like, or you could just talk to them like grown-ups. But that's more or less what Session Zero is. It's talking to your party like grown-ups. It can be as formal or informal as your particular group demands. If you're playing with close friends, a casual conversation might be all you need. But if you're playing with strangers at a game store, a printed checklist of potentially upsetting content can be a great tool, especially if you'd rather not loudly announce your darkest fears when you're 10 feet away from a bunch of 8th graders who are getting downright hostile over a game of Settlers of Catan. Your Session Zero doesn't have to look like anything in particular. There are a bunch of helpful tools out there, but you get to decide whether or not you need them. It's more about intentionally making space for those conversations, so you don't hit Session 30 and suddenly realize that Kenneth over here was expecting at least twice as much eco-terrorism as he's been getting, and he's pretty disappointed. I want to note that even though Session Zero typically happens before a game begins, it's never too late to have those kinds of conversations. Even if you're already 8 months in and a half dozen plot twists deep, you can still say, hey, I realized that we never really talked about what kind of content we want and don't want in this game. Can we set aside some time to go over that? Personally, I really like the lines and veils system. In this system, a line is something that you don't want involved in the game at all, and a veil is something where you don't mind it being referenced, but you don't want it to be played out in real time in front of you. For example, I personally get squicked out by childbirth, but obviously I'm cool with babies being born in the world of the game. I'm not anti-baby, I just don't really want to sit through a whole scene of people yelling push and descriptions of various bodily fluids. So for me, childbirth is a veil. In my opinion, there are 2 different romance conversations that are helpful to have during Session Zero. The first is just to establish who wants to participate in what. I like to frame this in categories: romance between player characters and NPCs, and romance between 2 player characters. You may even want to discuss romance between NPCs if that's part of the DM's plans. For each one, players can mark themselves as open to participating, okay with it happening but not involving them, or not comfortable with it at all. So if even one player is not comfortable with player-to-player romantic roleplay at all, then nobody at the table does it. But if everyone's okay with it existing, but only a few people want to partake, those people are welcome to romance each other. All this includes the game master, by the way. They are under no obligation to make their NPCs single and ready to mingle, no matter how much their players want to be swept off their feet by a handsome blacksmith. The second conversation is about all the little subheadings that fall under the larger category of romance. Some people are okay with long romantic conversations, or don't mind if it's implied that characters are getting freaky off screen. But there are also people who don't want anything beyond a little innocent flirting happening live in their living room on a Tuesday night. It's also worth remembering that romance roleplay can also bring up some related content that people might have separate boundaries around, like pregnancy, STDs, infidelity, or abusive relationships. This is exactly why those Session Zero content checklists are so popular. They make it easy to cover all your bases long before you realize that werewolf custody battle is even on the table. Remember that anybody can change their mind about this stuff anytime. Somebody might think they're okay with R-rated roleplay until suddenly it's actually happening, and they're sitting there wondering if they can cast blindness deafness with a target of self. Everyone should feel comfortable speaking up if they realize that their boundaries have changed. By the way, not all of these conversations have to be full group conversations. When 2 player characters start making eyes at each other, those players can discuss the details privately, away from the table, to make sure that they're cool with the same things. And if your party isn't as into romance as you are, this could also be a great opportunity to take your more intimate roleplay away from the table. Write each other in-character love letters. Roleplay your date night one-on-one. Go out to a nice dinner to discuss your characters. And then invite your roleplay partner back to your place for some coffee and just see where the night goes. Just be careful. These things can snowball, and next thing you know, you're explaining to your families why your wedding vows included the 10-minute ritual casting of ceremony. Now, if you're a dungeon master and you're anything like me, verbal information only takes 3 to 5 business days to trickle out of your ears, so I would highly recommend keeping a written log of what topics are off limits. That way, you'll be ready to interrupt a scene to check in, call for a break, or enforce boundaries that might be getting pushed on. Speaking of dungeon masters, your PCs don't have to be involved in relationships in order for romance to be one of the themes of your game. Romantic relationships between NPCs can be key elements of the story, and if your party is anything like mine, they can even make players more invested in your characters. In the game where I played Penelope, we spent several sessions dungeon crawling just to get this special moss for a hot farmer NPC who was trying to get into the good graces of the apothecary whose daughter he was in love with. Our adventures are 80% heroics, 20% matchmaking, but we're trying to get those numbers up. Don't worry, you don't have to go back and forth role-playing real-time romance scenes with yourself, unless you want to. too, no judgment. But incorporating subtle relationships between NPCs can add flavor and depth to your world. Maybe an NPC asks the party to deliver a love letter or help them win back their ex. Maybe an NPC begs you to rescue their lover from danger, or insists that they're missing when they've really just run off with a boy bard named Kevin. Kevin with a Y. Because fantasy. When thinking of what motivates your NPCs, don't discount love or jealousy or desperation or heartbreak as relatable human experiences. Or dwarf experiences, you know what I mean. Once everyone is agreed that you're open to your characters finding love, it's time for the fun part. Although, let's be honest, there are a lot of D&D nerds for whom flirting is less the fun part and more the scary part. I feel like there are two kinds of nerds, the debaucherous ones and the ones who can't tell when they're being hit on and would frankly panic if they knew. No shade, I'm in that category too. Thankfully, we're playing pretend, and I promise, if you can pretend to cast spells and pull skeletons apart with your bare hands, you can pretend to be flirtatious too. May I present Flirting 101. Lesson 1. If you're nervous, try creating a little mental distance. You're not flirting, Sir Cedric the Silver-Tongued is. And trust me, ladies love that guy. Sometimes leaning into the performance of it can make it easier. You might find that by going bigger and more extreme than you would in real life, like writing love poetry or making bold innuendos, you can release some of that self-consciousness. This isn't you being vulnerable, it's putting on a show. Lesson 2 is for those who want to go a little more subtle. Remember, when people have a crush, they are paying attention, and they'll do anything to get close to their love interest. Your character might be extra protective in combat, or volunteer to stand watch with them for no particular strategic reason. Crushing on the barmaid at a local tavern? Wow, your character is suddenly a regular at the Buxom Owl. Come on guys, they just really like the wings. All I'm saying is you don't have to be throwing out pickup lines in order to demonstrate interest. Even just saying, "I'm glad you're safe" after a fight can be intensely romantic if delivered in the right tone. You might be asking, what is the right tone? If you're not sure, take a look at Lesson 3. Use third-person narration to make it easy and keep things clear. Just like you don't have to kick down a real door to say your character does it, you don't have to flirt in order to describe your character doing it. Maybe you tell the cleric that they keep catching your character looking at them, and every time they blush and look away. Maybe you just straight up say, Cragnock the Skull Crusher buys the bard a drink and spends the evening flirting with him. And if you're a DM, you can always call for a charisma check to see how much game that character has, or an insight check to see if a character realizes that they're being hit on. Wouldn't it be nice if we had that in real life? The fourth and final lesson is to not worry so much about it being awkward. If your character isn't supposed to be awkward, you can just say, but they do it in a suave way after you describe it. We're all here to suspend our disbelief. If your party can imagine a magic portal or a fire-breathing dragon, they can imagine your line being delivered by, I don't know, young Harrison Ford. But also, flirting is often awkward. There's nothing unrealistic about blushing or getting flustered or stumbling over your words. You can always lean into it and make it part of the character's charm. Trust me, nothing's more endearing than someone who has the guts to sneak up behind a lich and poke him with a dagger, but is too scared to say, "You look nice today." Of course, when your character kicks down a door or stabs a lich, there are mechanics for that. So should we be adding in-game mechanics for romance? Should you be rolling for yearning? It's worth saying right up front that there are plenty of games that prioritize romance and character relationships in their structure. Games like Monster Hearts, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, or Star-Crossed, which I made a whole video about, center romantic relationships as a key part of the story, and that's reflected in the game mechanics. Even games that aren't explicitly romantic may have relationship mechanics if relationships are considered important. For example, Fabula Ultima has bonds, which can be strengthened or weakened and can be invoked to trigger an effect. Very useful if your party's dynamic is found family, will they, won't they, or please stop stabbing each other during long rests. If you're really intent on relationship mechanics, it may be that another game is better suited to your needs. Or even if you want to stick to D&D, playing some of these other games might give you ideas on how to incorporate features like that. It's very in the spirit to take two game systems and go, "Now kiss." But while D&D doesn't have in-depth social mechanics, it does have some. For example, page 32 of the Dungeon Master's Guide notes that any creature controlled by the DM can be given one of 3 attitudes: friendly, indifferent, or hostile. Certain actions, potentially tied to ability checks, can shift these attitudes. You could easily add more shades to make this work for romance. Maybe a creature is only romanceable if their attitude is friendly, but pursuing a more intimate relationship with them unlocks additional tiers, like affectionate, romantic, and committed. And maybe some creatures are locked into the emotionally unavailable tier, just to keep it realistic. Also, one of my favorite favorite underrated optional rules is Renown, detailed on page 92 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is typically used to track a character's reputation with a faction or organization, but could easily be adapted to keep track of the strength of a relationship between two individuals. Both of these mechanics could be used to supplement romantic roleplay if you play in a group that wants a little more structure, or if someone in your group is interested in min-maxing their way into a marriage. I am not at all against romance mechanics if it suits the group. Groups that like the themes but don't feel comfortable digging deep into scene-by-scene romantic roleplay might enjoy having a system that allows them to court, get married, and have children without being expected to play out the plot of the Notebook in real time. Or maybe your party is made up of the kinds of players who just really love number go up, even when it comes to storytelling. I get it, I love number go up. I also think mechanics can be helpful in pacing romance appropriately. At many tables, it takes weeks of real time to get through just days of in-game time, so it's easy to misjudge how fast a relationship is moving. If you've ever realized that you married an NPC after knowing them for 11 in-game days, you're not alone. One day it's nice to meet you, and the next it's, do you want to get matching cloaks and adopt a blink dog together? In the end, there's a reason that romance and courtship are part of so many of our favorite fantasy stories, whether it's Arwen and Aragorn making sad eyes at each other, or Sir Galahad the Pure being sexually harassed at a convent. That's why I always carry a sword, in case of nuns. Love and intimacy are part of the human experience, and they can be just as compelling an addition to your game as an epic battle or a dramatic betrayal. In fact, if you put a little work in, you can link all three together. And if you're not a romance person and you still watched this whole video, I don't know, maybe try it out. You might be surprised.
What? What?
Now it's kissing again. You don't want to hear that.
I don't mind so much.